Welcome children. Today we will do a new chapter in grammar, and that is chapter 15, voice. So let us link it. Okay, so read the pair of sentences which are given over here. The baker baked half a dozen loaves. Half a dozen loaves were baked by the baker. We will tidy the class. The class will be tidied by us. Grandmother was planting the seeds yesterday. Yesterday the seeds were being planted by grandmother. The new player had taken 2 wickets. 2 wickets had been taken by the new player. I will have completed this project tomorrow. This project will have been completed by me tomorrow. Grandfather is pruning the trees. The trees are being pruned by grandfather. Now here question is there to complete these sentences. The subjects in the first set of sentences are the baker, and the subjects in the second sets of sentences are half a dozen loaves. Okay. Now circle the objects in each pair of sentences in the table you just read. Tick the correct answers. In the first column, the subjects, what we see in the very first sentence is the baker baked half a dozen loaves. Now here the baker is baking, right? So in the first column, the subject is the action, means the baker is doing the action. In the second column, the subjects like half a dozen loaves were baked by the baker. So that is are acted upon, means the cakes are being baked. Okay, so they are receivers, they are not the doers. Now read these sentences. The parliament passed the bill, which we call active voice, and the bill was passed by the parliament. We call it as a passive voice. Now both these sentences express the same idea. How it expresses the same idea? Like the parliament passed the bill. We come to know that the parliament has passed the bill. And second sentence, the bill was passed by the parliament. So about the bill it is common in two sentences. So second sentences also is telling us the same manner but in a different way, that the bill was passed by the parliament. So it is known as passive voice. So both these sentences express the same idea but in two different ways. So the verb past changes to was passed in the passive voice. So the first sentence emphasizes the doer or the subject, that is the parliament. So here the parliament passed means the parliament is the doer of the action. So the parliament is the subject who is doing the action. So we call it as an active voice. But when I say the bill was passed, here the subject becomes the bill in the second sentence. But here the bill is not the doer, but the bill is the recipient, is the receiver of the action. Okay, something is done on the bill. The bill is not doing anything. So it becomes a passive voice. Now, so here it is written, the first sentence emphasizes the doer or the subject, that is the parliament, and the second sentence on the other hand stresses the action, that is the passing of the bill. So the preposition by is used to indicate the doer of the action in the second sentence. So by is generally used when we are changing from doer to the receiver. Okay, so when we change from active to passive, the passive we use by word. The preposition so by indicates the doer of the action in the second sentence. So when I say the bill was passed by the parliament, so by we use to show by whom that action was done. Okay. Now, when the subject is the doer of the action, the verb is said to be in the active voice. Okay. And when the subject is acted upon by the verb or is affected by the action, the verb is said to be in the passive voice. So, when I say the cat killed the mouse, here the cat has killed. The cat is the doer of the action, so it becomes an active voice. But when I say the mouse was killed by the cat, so mouse was not the doer of the action, but it was the receiver of the action. So, here the mouse becomes the passive voice. Okay. Now, rules for changing from active voice to passive voice. The subject in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice. So, when we have this sentence and there we find the subject is the doer of the action, but when we change the same sentence into passive, the subject there becomes the object. And the object which was there in the active voice, when we change to passive, it becomes the subject in the passive voice. But the meaning of the sentence, it does not change. The tense for the time of action of the sentence remains the same. The type of sentences does not change. A statement remains a statement, and so on. So, we should say, see that whenever we are changing from active to passive or passive to active, the meaning should remain the same. It should not change. And tense also remains the same. That is very important part. The type of sentences does not change. The preposition by is generally used. It is used to in the passive voice when we mention the doer of the action in the sentence. So, whenever we are using the passive voice, we use by word to show the doer of the action. The person doing the action is called the agent. So, the person who is doing the action is called the agent. Now, when the verb is changed from the active to the passive voice, the object of the transitive verb become the subject of the verb in the passive voice. Therefore, only, let me read this last line. So, when the verb is changed from the action in the passive voice, the object of the transitive verb becomes the subject of the verb in the passive voice. Therefore, only transitive verbs can be used in the passive voice. An intransitive verb is a verb without an object and cannot be used in the passive voice. So, this was very important point. That is, whenever we are using the verb changing from active to passive, we use a transitive verb because transitive verbs consist of an object. We cannot use intransitive word because it does not consist of an object. This is very important part. Now, next is verbs that need objects are called transitive verb. For example, the boy painted the wall. Here, painted is a transitive verb with the object wall. Okay. Verbs that do not require objects are called intransitive verb. For example, we stayed in school. So, stayed here is intransitive with no object. Okay. Now, so here are few exercises which you will try. Now, let us see the more rules for changing the sentences from active to passive. In case of commands, like when we command something, we follow the structure let plus subject plus be plus past participle form of verb when changing the sentence to the passive voice. So, whenever we have a sentence which says a command, okay, which reflects command, order, then we follow this structure, that is let plus, let word should be used, okay, plus the subject will come, then be verb, that is, am or are, plus past participle form of verb, okay. Like for example, shut the door. It is in the active voice, but that is your command. So, we have learnt we should use let when we change to passive voice. So, let the door be shut. So, it becomes the passive voice. Now, in case of an interrogative sentence which asks question, the sentence retains its interrogative form. So, it will be asked again in the interrogative form only. For example, Are you buying a pen? We put a question mark, it is an active voice. But when we change to passive, is a pen being bought? Now, why being we have used? Because we have ing form of verb. So, when you have a continuous tense of verb, we use being there. So, whenever you have ing, we should use being. So, are you buying a pen? Is a pen being bought by you? Now, by you because you word is there. So, it becomes a passive voice. Now, when we change the voice of a sentence that has a phrasal verb like break into, look after means consist of two words. Phrasal, you know, phrases which have the meaning but not a complete meaning. The preposition of the phrasal verb does not change the position. For example, someone broke into the pet shop. Now it is an active voice. Why it is an active voice? Because someone is the doer of the action. Okay, someone is what he did. Someone broke into. So it's a doer of the action. So it's an active voice. So when we change it, we have learned that phrasal verbs remains the same. So here when we are changing to passive voice, the pet shop was broken into. Okay, so it broken into will remain same and it will not change the position. Okay, now passive voice, we know passive when the doer of the action is the not doer but the subject becomes the receiver of the action. So we use the passive voice when we want to highlight the recipient or object of an action instead of the doer. So here we see when we want to say, when we want to reflect, when we want to emphasize on the subject who is not the doer but is the receiver of the action, we make it a passive voice. Like for example, the president was welcomed by the participants. It is also used when the agent or the doer of the action is unknown. For example, the window was broken. Now, here we don't know, it is not written by you, by her, by him, nothing is written. So, we don't know the agent, right? Who is the doer. So, but it is not done by me. I cannot say, na, the window was broken by me. I haven't written. So, it doer we don't know. So, it generally we use a passive voice like the window was broken. Okay, so it is also used when the agent is not known. We use the passive voice. It may be used when we do not want to mention the doer of the action, like the door was repaired, the building was painted. So definitely by someone it was painted and by someone it was repaired, but it is not mentioned here. So in passive we can omit the agent also and we can write like this. But if the agent is given in the active voice, we have to mention in the passive voice. Okay, so children, today we have learnt about the active and passive voice. So active voice is what? When the subject, the person who is doing the action, okay, who is the doer of the action, that becomes an active voice. But in passive voice, we say when the doer is the receiver of the action. Like I explained you, the cat killed the mouse. Here the cat is doing the action by what is action? Kill the mouse. Okay, so it becomes an active voice. But the if I say the rat was killed by the cat, so rat, it was killed, it did not kill anyone. So here passive voice. And we have learned the rules that subject in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice, and object in the active voice become the subject in the passive voice. Okay, tenses remain the same, and the preposition by is used in the passive voice. And generally we use the transitive verb because it consists of an object. We do not use intransitive words. And always remember that when we change from active to passive, we should place the subject followed by object, or an object followed by subject, and vice versa. So that is subject and active and passive voice. So children, your homework is to go through the chapter thoroughly and read all the examples carefully, and you have to do the exercises. Let us crack it. And let us crack it, you have to do um, A, B, and let us perfect it. We will do B and C. Okay, so Prepare well and do your exercises. Thank you.